The first step in the conservation process is to surface clean the sheet of paper. Once that's been achieved, the next step is the removal of the linen. Now, the linen is being removed in two different manners, even though basically the problem is the same with every piece. In some instances, it proves to be more efficient to remove the linen. The first step is as a dry process. So at this point, we haven't even wetted the paper or tried to saturate the adhesives. What we've done is we've cut the linen backing into strips as we go so that we're not pulling on stressing too large of an area of the sheet. And in this case, the bond had weakened sufficiently between the adhesive and the linen that we're able to peel it back very slowly, simply by what we call a dry peel method. Once this has been achieved over the entire surface and the linen is removed, the next step is over here. The other technique for removing the linen, if the adhesives are a little more stubborn, is to saturate through the back of the linen using filtered water. And this is done, we give it ample time to penetrate the linen and the adhesives. This is just Mylars, keeping the water from evaporating. And then once the linen is sufficiently saturated, we'll be able to peel it away wet. And then we'll go right into the glue removal because the adhesive will have been already saturated with moisture and dissolved. So James is using a palette knife and removing the softened adhesive from the verso of the paper. And probably I would say about 95% or more of the adhesive is removed in this process. There's still some that is retained in the paper fiber that would be removed with a rinsing process. Now the prints, of course, prior to the backing that was done in the 1930s, which we're correcting now, had been handled to varying degrees, and so the problems vary quite a lot from plate to plate. Most of the plates are intact and really can be returned very, very close, if not all the way, to their original condition. This particular plate obviously has some more severe issues that with the large tear that you can see in the margin, a pretty severe fold in the bottom left corner, and there's an area here where the copper plate mark is that is weakened and beginning to break and tear, separate from the sheet. A few interior tears. This piece is about halfway through the conservation process. The linens have been removed. The glue has been removed from the back. You can still see the residual staining from the glue. And then the cleaning process has begun with this piece. The next step is going to be to saturate the paper. This particular piece is going to be backed with Japanese tissue. This is only very, very few of the plates are going to have that kind of backing. It's important to retain the original character and quality of the Whatman paper. So in almost every instance, we're not using backing materials other than some very, very small pieces of Japanese tissue to locally repair tears. The severity of this tear dictates that in order to uniformly support the paper, we're going to have to back the entire sheet with Japanese tissue. This is an example of the mulberry paper that we're using. This paper is inherently acid-free. It's not sized. It's very fibrous, and it's an ideal material to use as a supportive tissue for a work of art on paper. One of the primary objectives when you are required to back a sheet is that the backing material be subordinate to the original paper. So in other words, we want to use as light a weight of material as possible and influence the original character and weight of the artwork as little as possible. So in this case, we're going to use a very, very thin Japanese tissue. It'll be practically invisible once the work is done and it's applied to the back with a starch-based adhesive, which is acid-free and reversible. Susan is working on the final stages of the conservation process for this particular print, the broad-winged hawk. And at this point, she's just beginning to lay in paper fiber to some areas where there was some fiber breakdown in the original sheet, some small tears at the perimeter. And the paper fiber is actually made here by us by hand, and then it's being laid into the original paper. The fiber is made up of cotton pulp and methyl cellulose, so it's essentially a paper making process. That fiber then integrates with the original paper, and it's dried locally under pressure and becomes a part of the sheet. And then it's white in color at that point, and it's toned with watercolor to match the color of the surrounding antique paper. This is a very skillful process because you want that watercolor to be applied only to the paper fiber that we've laid into the missing areas and not necessarily to affect the original paper surrounding the repair. This is a specially designed suction device that allows for the conservation, cleaning, as stain reversal of leaves in a book without having to disbind the book. This happens to be a particularly important folio of Goya's Los Caprichos, one of the most important etching works produced in the 18th century. This is a very rare first edition in the original binding from 1799. So it is important that we're able to conserve this and keep the original binding intact. This is a traditional vacuum, cold suction vacuum table. This device is designed with an ultra-thin platen, which is the perforated metal plate through which the suction is running. And the platen is formed in a wedge shape, and the very, very end of it is extremely thin, can be inserted all the way into the binding edge of the book without the moisture having an adverse effect on the binding.